To start creating the animation, first I'm going to create a new file, then I'm going to go to File and Place, and let's find the sequence JPEG that you should have downloaded. In this case I saved it in here. There it is, walking sequence. I'll say Place and just place it in the center of your document. Notice in your layers it's on layer 1. I'm going to lock down layer 1 and create a new layer on top of it. The trick to creating an animation is that every character that you draw must be drawn on a separate layer by itself. So I'm going to draw off one really quick. You'll notice that they're made up of some basic simple shapes. I'm going to use the circle to create the head, and you can use the pencil tool or the pen tool, whichever you're most comfortable with, to finish drawing off the rest of the body. You can see I'm going really quick, not even paying attention to the details. I can go back and clean it up. You do not have to add any shading to the arms or to the leg. You don't have to add any details if you don't want to the rest of the figures. Also notice that in an animation, you're not just moving your arms and legs. The heads and the whole body moves up and down in this walking sequence. Let's go back over to our layers. If I was to turn off layer 1, we can see the drawing that I've created, and you can see it's very, very rough. If you took more time to do it, remember to draw off each character in its own layer. So for the next layer, I'm going to create a new one for layer 3. I'm going to lock down layer 2, and then draw off the second layer, and the third and fourth on their own consecutive layers. When you're finished, you should have something that looks a lot like this. You can see that I've drawn them all off and paid a lot better attention to the details. Also in my layers palette, each one is on its separate layer, and I've gone ahead and deleted the first layer that we've traced off on, our background layer. Now here comes the magic. Once you've drawn off each of the characters, it's very important that you group each one of them together. So select each character and go through and group all of the elements together. As soon as they're all grouped, you can select them all by clicking and dragging over them. Notice that they all have a different bounding outline. They're all different colors because they're on different layers. With them all selected, let's open up our Align toolbox. I'm going to drag it off so we can see it. And we're going to select the center alignment, horizontal center alignment. When I click it, it'll place each of the characters on top of each other, and they're all in the same space. Let's close that back out. Now here's how to save your animation. Go to File and down to Export. In the Export dialog box, one of the formats you can save it as is a Flash SWF. With this selected, I'm going to call it Walker SWF, and I'll hit Export. This will then bring up some SWF options, and these are very important. At first, let's go back to the basic. This is the basic setup that you want it to save your Flash file as. It's important to export it as AI layers to SWF frames. You don't want to save it as an SWF file, or the layers to the files are different symbols. You want the AI layers to be SWF frames. Next, click on the Advanced word. This will give you some more options. We want to make sure looping is selected. And since we created our layer order from the bottom up, we want to change our layer order instead of top down to bottom up. Let's see what that looks like. You can preview this by clicking the Web Preview button. If you're in a newer version of Adobe CS, the Web Preview button is usually at the lower left-hand side of the box. When I click it, it'll open up our little animation in whatever web browser you use, and you can test it and see that it's walking, looking pretty good. If for some reason your web browser says that it's missing a plugin, you probably need to update your Flash player. You can do this by downloading the Flash player from Adobe. Since everything looks good, let's go back to Illustrator. I'm still in my SWF options. I'll click OK, and that'll save the SWF file. That file is what you'll upload to turn in for this grade. For the extra credit assignment, we're going to take our little animation and turn it into a simple little video game that you can control. And we're going to do this in Flash. So let's go down to our dock and find Adobe Flash. In this case, I'm using CS5. When you launch Flash, your version may look a little different than what I have, but everything that we're going to be doing should be exactly the same. To create a new file, let's go to File and choose New. This will bring up the New Document dialog box, and you're going to choose the Action Script 3 and say OK. Now if you want your working environment to look similar to mine, let's go to Window, down to Workspace, and I like working in the Developer workspace. Give it just a second. Again, yours may look slightly different, but everything on here should be the same as I step through it. The main working area is in the center. This is your stage, and you've got multiple palettes and options going around the different stages. The first thing we need to do is to change the size of the artboard that we're working on. So let's go to Modify, the Document. This will bring up your document settings. We're going to change it to 900 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. And we'll say OK. This will make your artboard a little bit bigger. The next thing we need to do is to import that little Flash file, the little animation we just created. You can do this by going to File, down to Import, and choose Import to Library. As soon as you click it, it'll bring up your little import dialog box, and we'll have to choose the SWF file that we created. I believe I saved it. Let's see, where did I save it? To the desktop? Nope. Animation, there it is. Walker SWF. And I'll say Open. At first it looks like I didn't do anything. You need to find your library palette, and in my case it's in the lower left-hand corner. Here's the library. Here's the Walker SWF. This is the little animation we created, and you can see there's a preview. To add this to our document, click on the name and drag it into the stage. And you can see the little guy is now on your stage. You can move him around and place him wherever you want. The next thing we need to do, in Adobe Flash, you need to give every element you add to a stage a particular name. To add a name to an element, find your Properties palette. It's usually in the upper right-hand corner. Again, if you don't see any of these palettes, you can always go to Window and then find the properties checked off within that list. I'm going to go up to the right-hand corner. Under Properties, there's an Instance Name. In this case, we're going to call it Character 1, spelled no spaces, all lowercase. C-H-A-R-A-C-T-E-R, and the number 1. This is going to be very important when we add the code to allow our little animated guy to move around. The next thing we need to do is to add another line to our timeline. I don't see our timeline, so I'm going to go to Window and then down to Timeline. Here it is at the bottom of our screen. Just as in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop works in multiple layers, Adobe Flash also works in multiple layers. In Layer 1, we have our little animated guy. We're going to create a new layer by clicking on the New Layer icon. And in Layer 2, we're going to add our code. So I've clicked on Layer 2. Now we need to open up our Actions panel to add the programming that will allow us to move our little character around. So I'm going to go to Window, down to Actions. That'll open up a frame on top of everything. I've provided you with the programming on the Moodle site, so all you have to do is download it and use it. So let's see if I can find it. Here it is. It's called Character Programming, and when you double click, it'll open it up in Text Edit, and it's all just a text document. So I'm going to select all, edit and copy. Then I'm going to go back into Flash, and in our Actions frame, I'm going to click once and then paste it into our frame. You can look over the code and notice that some of the words will be blue and some of them will be black. That's totally normal. And if you read over it and you know anything about Flash and programming, you can probably figure out what's going on with each of the events. Now you've got everything set up. Let's test our little animation and see what happens. To test it, you can either hit Command Return, or you can go to Control, down to Test Movie, and choose Test. This will open up another little window on your screen, and you notice our little man isn't moving. However, if I use my arrow keys and push back and forth, he can walk around. And this is the essence of creating a Flash simple little program. And this is what you'll turn in for me. To save the file, let's close out this window and go back into Flash. You can go to File, down to Save As, and I believe we're going to call it Simple Game Animation. Hit Save. The format will be in Flash FLA, and you can upload that to your Moodle site.